Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and joining me, as always, my fearless colleague in arms, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing well, Dr. Dave. Thanks for the introduction.
Today's topic is going to be entrepreneurial spirit. And as we always like to do, one of us brings up the subject and then quickly and abruptly tosses it to the other person like a hot potato and let them kind of take the lead for a little bit. And then we go back and forth. We also try to ensure that we capture both the personal and professional side, which is one of the key elements of our podcast. So, Dr. Joe, what are your thoughts on entrepreneurial spirit?
Well, first, I'd like to say that's a mouthful. Entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah. Well, when we think of being an entrepreneur in general, we think of, starting a business, owning a business. We always think in terms of business. And me and Dave both have started a business or a couple of businesses together alone. So we understand, just enough to be dangerous as far as starting a business. But the reality is, it's not just about starting a business, starting or creating a business that provides a product or a service, but it's rather about the entrepreneurial spirit. And that can translate across everything you do, personal, professional, in your job, at home. And so that's what I've learned since, starting my business back in 2015. It's just the idea that that entrepreneurial spirit is should be alive in just about everything you do. And it typically is, but we just don't really think of it that way. So for example, if you've got an entrepreneurial spirit, you're working on a project at work and, you're stuck, the team is stuck. You having prior knowledge or experience of, resolving an issue previously, you bring that to the table to help assist that team to get to the next level or complete that project. And that's based on, again, typically when we start a business is because we want to resolve some type of issue or help somebody with an issue or provide a product. And that's really no different than being on a team and trying to resolve a problem. And so being able to lend your expertise, your skill set to that team. And so that's why I think of it now as, taking all that knowledge, experience, training, skills that you have and applying it to something else. And so that's now my, again, interpretation of what an entrepreneurial spirit is. So
Yeah, I like what you were saying, Joe, about the application of professional environment and the problem solving piece. And I'm going to extend that one just a little bit more of what you said, and it'd be creative problem solving, because really,
right.
That's what entrepreneurs do. Or someone with entrepreneurial spirit, at least I believe, is that, they identify an issue, like you said, whether it's
Yeah.
internal to a company, maybe it's a personal thing, and they figure out a creative way to turn it into something else or to solve or resolve that problem or that challenge.
Right.
So, again, whether it's personal or professional, whether it's for a business for yourself or a project at work, or, maybe it's a project around the house if you're into the DIY stuff. So, I think that having an entrepreneurial spirit is very important because it allows you to think of things from a different perspective, and and it's more about how efficiently and how effectively you can come up with a solution versus, how long can we drag this out,
Right.
what are all the what if scenarios. It's not about that. It kind of gets back into the phrase minimum viable product in some regards. It could be a minimum viable service as well. I mean, what do you
Right.
do to get things going or to resolve this issue or to meet the needs of a client or a friend or a company or customer, internal or external customers. So yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned on the professional side, but then you also kind of integrated the personal side, like a DIY project you got at home. Just figuring out, doing your taxes, doing your
Mhm.
your finances. Trying to figure out how to be the most efficient. I
Mhm.
think that's really important. That piece that you're trying to make it better or trying to improve versus the status quo, or just repeating the same mistakes. It's just
Mhm.
taking that idea of, improvement and learning, and making it better, that turns into that entrepreneurial spirit. And so, again, most business people that have a business or thinking about starting a business, they kind of already have that in mind. But like I said, for the most part, most of us have that. We just may not have viewed it that way, or
Yeah,
not really understood that
or
that's what
tapped
it
into
really
it.
was, or tapped into it. Just,
Mhm.
I think the biggest part of it is when you think about trying to resolve an issue, or improve an issue, that really taps into that, and Dave said, that creative side of us, that we, go away from the standard thing we do every day,
Mhm.
the thing that how we always do it, but this now requires that little extra thought, that
Mhm.
maybe thinking of it in a different way or a different perspective. And that's why it's important, if you've got a team that's designed that way, 5 people on a team, and 3 or 4 of them have that entrepreneurial spirit, you're going to have a lot of creativity brewing
Yeah,
within that team, on different ways, and trying to figure out how to resolve whatever that problem is.
yeah,
Not to say that that could be always a positive,
right.
because just depending on how far that person is into understanding, that piece of it, and having that collaborative, input, it could result in some type of conflicts, and kind of a confusion amongst
Yeah.
everybody else. So yeah, sometimes be careful what you wish for, ask
Right.
for, because if you do have a team of 5 people that are all have that entrepreneurial spirit, but have not really understood, okay, we all need to work together, then that
Yeah.
could be a problem, because then you could have a stalemate because everybody believes their idea is the best.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that we need to keep in mind is an entrepreneurial spirit doesn't necessarily mean creating a business or an
right,
LLC or a sole proprietorship or an S corp or anything like that. It could just mean, hey, I've got a project. I want to build something in my backyard, or an outdoor kitchen or something like that. That's on my bucket list. But it's like, what do you do? Do you hire someone? Do you do it yourself? If you decide to do it yourself, what does that look like? What are the pros and cons? So you really start exploring many different options and avenues. And I think that aspect of critical thinking brings about um, positive synergy
right,
to create that solution, or identify the solution or the viability. And as Joe had mentioned, him and I have had several projects together, and
right,
businesses and that sort of thing. And that's just one piece of it. I mean, we're published authors, and there's a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit that goes into managing the process and project aspect of writing a book. It's not just, oh, I'm going to sit down and write a book for, it's 300 pages and today. Well, some people can do that, but typically
right,
there's a little bit more that goes into it than just writing a book. You got to think about what the tone, what is it going to be about? Are you going to utilize references? Is it fiction, nonfiction? I mean, there's a lot that really goes into it. How much research, how much writing are you going to do? What's the anticipated completion date? There's a lot that goes into many, many things that can be downplayed. I've got a cupcake business. Well, that's fine. How hard is that? Well, it's not hard to make a cupcake, or is it? What type of
right,
cupcakes are you making? So, we really have to think about and give credit where credit's due to people that do have entrepreneurial spirit, because without them, I believe there wouldn't be much advancement in technology or medicine or anything else, because we'd just be doing the same thing over and over, like you mentioned, that status quo piece. So when you think about entrepreneurial spirit, it's like we need to consider how diverse can we utilize that spirit in resolving issues. Maybe it's a communication issue. Maybe you're having, challenges with your kids or your parents or whatever. How can you use that entrepreneurial spirit to spark that creative problem solving and critical thinking?
right. Which, and I think back to, now that we've been talking about this, but I think back to, my dad and some of the things he did, back when we were growing up, and
Mhm.
now kind of reflecting on what we're talking about in that, and I can see a lot of that in my dad, and that's why I respected him so much, because he did have that creative mind, and I
Hmm.
think he could have done just about anything he wanted to do because I think he did possess a lot of those things. Quick problem solving, creative, and just. But I think part of his issue was that sometimes he just jumped right into it,
Yeah,
and without feedback input from others that it was going to affect. I think
hmm,
that's important as well to think about.
sure.
I've got this great idea. I'm going to do it regardless. And I think that we wouldn't have some, like you say, some advancements, but at the same time, it could be done at a detriment too. And
Yeah,
that's in a couple of cases, that's the way it was with my dad because he tried stuff and it didn't pan out. But then you're left holding the bag with whatever direction he chose. But
hmm,
then on the other side of it, he created some amazing things that was at that time was nobody was thinking about doing it. So it
hmm,
was very cool to see those things, but at the same time, you had to suffer the other side of that too.
right.
So, yeah, but you're right. I think without if we don't have people with that creative entrepreneurial spirit, then we would not have some of those advances because they were willing to push the boundaries,
Yeah, yeah,
try different things. And I think that's one of the common themes here is you got to be willing to push outside of what you're used to seeing,
hmm,
what's right in front of you.
hmm,
Maybe expand that look or that vision of what you
hmm,
think might happen or what you want to happen. So that's why I think it's very important to have, maybe you call it a dreamer, just
hmm.
someone who has that ability to see something
Or a
that doesn't exist
visionary.
today, or
Yeah.
visionary. Yeah, that's another good term, maybe probably more appropriate, but just that person having that ability to see, maybe not having all the steps to get there, but really can see a clear picture
Hmm.
of what it looks like. And then the other important piece of that is having that ability to articulate that to others,
Yeah.
so that they start to visualize that same thing and start to understand, okay, if we do these things, this is what it could potentially lead to. And
Hmm.
and so like I say, some of us have it, that ability to see that. Most of us do. It's just how do you get it, get people to turn it on to see it for
Hmm.
themselves. And that's part of that. If you go back to what Dave said at the very beginning, personal development and professional development, that's really what this is helping you, to see beyond what's right in front of you and just having that mindset of, I've got this goal. I want to be this, and then putting together those pieces to get you there. That's
Hmm.
really what that entrepreneurial spirit is. Because Dave said it. We're authors, but when we started out, we didn't set out to be authors. We're podcasters. We
Hmm.
didn't set out to be podcasters, but
Yeah.
we opened our mind to the possibilities, and again kept that entrepreneurial spirit when we thought about, okay, what is this podcast going to be about? It's about helping other people, sharing our journey with them so that they could potentially, not have to take the long scenic route. That's having that
Yeah.
entrepreneurial spirit, just seeing a problem or an issue or concern that other people have, and then just trying to fill in the gaps or to assist them and to help them. And based on, again, our experiences, our education level, skills
Hmm.
we have from prior, lives and things like that, and then rolling that into some type of concept like, again, today, the podcast that helps other people.
Yeah, I think I really like where you're going with this, Joe. There's a couple of other pieces I'd like to bring into it that you've alluded to, and I'm going to pull them out real quick and then we can discuss them. But being a risk taker,
Yeah.
um, trying and continue to try even when you believe you're failing or something doesn't work out. I don't believe it's a failure if you're trying and it doesn't work.
Right.
It's just identifying a solution and understanding that it does take a team. And some folks might
Right.
challenge that idea saying, well, it doesn't take a team if I'm an artist. And I would challenge you in that scenario, like if you're doing something and you're the only person involved, is you do have a team, you just may not realize it, and that's your customer base. You might be creating that painting or that piece of woodwork or being that plumber or electrician that's just working by yourself. But if those customers are not telling other people how good you're doing, you're not going to get additional customers. So those people are actually, those customers are part of your team that are helping to market you, to expose you to other people. So, and I think a lot of people don't understand that to be successful or self-made, I've heard that term quite a bit the last several weeks. Oh, that person is self-made, but they're not really self-made because they had a support system. They had a team in place to
Right.
help them, to guide them, to develop them, to push the boundaries, to, you know, talk to other people, to get the word out about what they're doing and to what level of proficiency. So risk and trying and teamwork and having a team, I think, is really important because I believe it's true. I mean, book writing, who's going to edit it? Who's going to buy it? You know?
No, no, I think you bring up a very good point. When you talk about self-made and people doing, things by themselves, and perfect example for us is our education journey. Of course, we did the coursework, we turned in the assignments, we, adhered to the policies and all those things. But like you said, there were people in the background that assisted us that may not have been doing the papers or may not have been doing the assignments. People in my case, it was my wife that assisted me by doing a lot of the things that we would have done together, had I not been in school. So,
Mm-hmm.
she took a lot of those, things off of my plate to
Mm-hmm.
allow me to be able to move forward and to do these things. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, it definitely took a team for me to get where I was, and for my kids, to understand, dad can't do this with you today, or we don't have as much time as we used to have to do these things. So them understanding was a huge benefit and gain for me, because then I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to have the stress levels of, I'm not being a good dad, I'm not taking care of my family. But so
Right.
some of those things were alleviated for me. So absolutely, it took them, it took my friends,
Mm-hmm.
just even them supporting me by saying, "Hey, how's it coming?
I'm glad you brought
how's your,
that up because I
you
was going
know,
to say, what about your peers? What about your
right,
professors? What
yeah,
about all the researchers that had done research to culminate up to that point to where you
right,
could
right,
actually write the paper? You know, so there's a lot more that goes into things than people realize.
yeah,
You know, we learn from people all the time, from what worked and what didn't work,
right,
you know,
absolutely, yeah,
and we build upon those ideas. So it could be argued that nothing is really new. It just may not have been pursued.
right.
So
No, yeah, I agree. That again, we are really taking it beyond where it was before.
yeah.
It existed to some degree, but you may have changed it or even improved it or
Yeah.
made it different
Or
than what it
extended it
was.
so far that it
Right.
appears to be new, but everything is
Yep.
grounded from something.
Right. But again, back to the fact that it does typically take a team of people.
Yeah.
We always laugh and joke about that individual that stands up in the meeting that takes all the credit. Well, I did this, I did that. Yeah,
Mhm.
you may have done, the actual manual parts of it, but there were people that fed you information, people
Mhm.
that provided things for you, people that gave you dates, whatever it is, whatever data that you were able to use to plug into this presentation now that looks pretty, and you get to present it in front
Mhm.
of this team of people and take all the credit.
Yeah.
So it's if you ever hear people talk about the I, they're missing a few key
Yeah. They're missing
elements.
a few you use.
Right. So again, nothing to take, not to try and take anything from anybody for anything they've accomplished or they've done, but typically it is done with the help of
Yeah.
some type of assistance from
And
someone
I like
else.
how you brought that in because I started thinking that, like, if I'm a painter or a plumber and I'm doing it myself, am I really doing it myself? Aside from the customers buying it and talking about it, who provided me the paintbrushes? Where did the paint come from?
Right,
Where did the canvas come from? Where did the frames and all that? Where did that come from? Did I make the paint and the paintbrushes
right, right,
and the tools and the wrenches, and did I machine out the screwdrivers and stuff like that? I mean, where did I get this stuff from? Someone had to
right,
make them or help me make them, or maybe I
right.
did do it myself. But it's just, there's so much that goes into the entrepreneurial spirit, and I think risk taking and and perseverance are key. Just keeping, trying in the face of adversity or things that didn't work out quite as good as you wanted them to. It's not a failure, it just didn't work. You learned something,
Right.
you gained
Yep.
knowledge. You didn't fail. You learned what not to do, or what doesn't work, or at least what doesn't work at that time in that particular moment. It's not to say that you won't try it again later and it will work, because you've gained knowledge and understand what it takes to make those failures work.
Absolutely. And we've probably said this in one of our episodes, early on about success.
Mm-hmm.
That's how people become successful. They've had to fail
Mm-hmm.
many times before whatever that is worked or happened, because
Yeah.
you have to figure out what not to do in order to get it right. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad you talk about that, because that is part of that perseverance, that persistence, and knowing that, okay, I'm going to get it right or it's going
Mm-hmm.
to work the next time. It just
Yeah.
having that in mind, that I'm not going to, like you said, it's not a failure. It's just you're having to figure out a different solution for whatever that
Yeah.
problem is. And you continue to push and push until you get it to resolution. And
Mm-hmm.
so now that's a very big part of that persistence, because you may try it one time and say, well, it didn't work, I'm done,
Yeah.
and you haven't gained anything by that process. But
Yeah.
that persistence and perseverance is what's gonna, that's the, I think, one of the differentiators between someone who's successful and who's someone who's not. They may
Yeah.
have been given the same exact tools or the same canvas, but the person typically is going to be successful is that person that continue to push and persevere, and
Mm-hmm.
what through the ups and downs, and they didn't put it aside and say, well, I'm done, I gave it my all. So
Yeah. And along those lines, I've read articles about, college and pro athletes, even high school athletes, that have said many, many times, it's not the wins that matter. That's just the end result. It's what failures did you overcome to get you the experience and knowledge to win. That's
right,
the most important thing, because once you have that, you can repeat that process and win over
over
and
and
over
over
and over
again.
again.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the true win right there, is learning what it takes to reach the level of success that you want,
Right.
and those lessons, and to make it reproducible. So entrepreneurial spirit, I mean, there's so many levels to it. When we start peeling that onion back, the proverbial onion, there's so many pieces that go into, just like so many of our podcasts. These are not typically standalone topics that are
Right.
isolated. They intertwine, and as they intertwine, they create new recipes. And next thing you know, you have an awesome dish, instead
Right.
of a
Right.
lump of charcoal.
Right. Well, now I'll go back to something you said early on too about, me and you working on projects. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a business, but just some of the things that
Yeah.
we've done, in our spare time, and we continue to do. It's just having that entrepreneurial spirit, that collaboration, working with different people. Me and you, just in the time that we've known each other, we've met so many people, alone and then together,
Mm-hmm.
that we've compiled so many different projects and opportunities to do so many different things. And it's that excitement from all of us that
Yeah.
we're all trying to resolve a issue or
Or
to,
common goal or something.
common
Yeah.
goal. Yeah. Just all thinking in terms of how can we improve this, or how can we make this better? How
Mm-hmm.
can we, you know, get this to a point where it's acceptable across the board?
Yeah.
And just that, but that common goals is also important. And I kind of touched on that before, where if we all have these great ideas, but we all think our idea is better than the others, then yeah, we may have some great people in the room, great minds, but if they don't have a common goal, then that
Yeah.
all that creativity and entrepreneurial spirit does not benefit us.
Yeah.
We have no gain in that scenario, because we're all going to be bumping heads, fighting one another,
Yeah.
because we think our idea,
Yeah.
our whatever we want
And
to
and
do
what we
is
have to
better.
realize is that entrepreneurial spirit is not necessarily about competition or winning. It's
Right.
about resolving a challenge,
Yep. Yep.
and whatever we define as successfully completing that challenge or overcoming that challenge, that's really what it's about. So
Right.
in the last few minutes that we have, what would you like to add in, or throw in, or toss in, or what seeds you want to plant for our listeners and viewers?
Well, like I mentioned at the very beginning, and you do have to have an entrepreneurial spirit to, start a business, create a service or product. But I just, again, challenge you to just really think about what the things you do and how you can use that entrepreneurial spirit that will help you. Again,
Mhm.
think about resolving issues in your personal life or at a job, in your professional life, where you got a team and you're trying to resolve an issue or a major problem there. Think about, the whole idea behind having an entrepreneurial spirit is trying to resolve those issues. And it comes in all forms and fashion, whether it's you take your prior knowledge and experience and apply that to this, or you go out and learn new things. Dave said it
Right.
earlier about researching, about learning, what's already out there, how you can improve upon it, how you can use it, but maybe change it slightly to, fit or adapt to whatever you're trying to complete. So, like I said, I think most of us have an entrepreneurial spirit, but we may not identify it as that. But
Yeah.
it's there. It's in
Yeah.
us. It's just tapping into it at the appropriate time.
Yeah. I couldn't said it better. And I'm not going to say entrepreneurial spirit too many more times because that's a tongue twister.
It has been this whole
I
episode.
think your tongue goes numb after a while because it's flexing too much, articulating too
Right.
much. But it just sounds like a garbled mess after a while. But at least when I say it, it does. So on that note, we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us for another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. If you liked or enjoyed our episode and or our humor or lack thereof, please give us a like, share with as many people as you can, because that's what we're passionate about, is helping others. That's why we do this, is to help others, and as Joe mentioned, and as we've said so many times, so that you don't have to take the long scenic route like we did, well, unless you want
Right.
to.
Yep.
So on that note, we'd like to just say thank you again, and to keep on being your not so ordinary you.